Sky Chief has established an unequalled reputation for luxury in flight. In booking offices throughout the world, air travellers are asking for the best in air travel, and that's the service they receive in a Douglas DC6B, the world's most popular airliner. 2 out of every 3 people who travel by air make their flight in a fast, pressurized DC6B. In Australia, the leading privately owned airline, Australian National Airways, operates a big fleet of Sky Chiefs. Hundreds of services contribute to the operation of airlines, and one of the first to go into action when a ticket's sold is the reservation centre. Control of space in ANA's fleet of airliners is maintained in this Melbourne office. A traveller or a booking agent telephones, and the space control operator makes a reservation in a few seconds. Teletypes link Melbourne Space Control with ANA offices throughout Australia. This system has grown out of more than 20 years of practical experience in airline operations. Although Australians are the most air-minded people in the world, few have given much thought to the tremendous amount of organisation needed to keep a fleet of modern airliners operating efficiently. So let's have a look behind the scenes of Australian National Airways, Australia's most experienced airline. Passengers check in with their luggage at the city terminal, and a chain of activities which commenced when the booking was made moves smoothly to ensure a swift and really comfortable flight. Something forgotten in the excitement of preparing for the trip? Then you'll be able to buy it from a kiosk in the city or airport lounges. And there's always trained staff to help. Meanwhile, the Sky Chief is being serviced at the airport in readiness for its flight to Sydney and Brisbane. The big plane takes in fuel at the rate of 200 gallons a minute under the supervision of the flight engineer. One of the crew of 3 will be at the controls of the Sky Chief. Huge quantities of freight are flown around Australia every day, much of it by DC6B. An aeroplane big enough to carry 58 passengers and several tons of cargo. Airmail is placed aboard for swift transport too. Back at the terminal in the city, passengers are setting out for the airport in buses provided by the airline. The Sky Chief naval board is an early morning flight, and breakfast will be served in the air. The food is taken aboard and stored in an electric oven so that every meal will be piping hot when the hostesses are ready to serve them. The bus reaches the airport with its load of passengers and their luggage. While porters load the luggage into the Sky Chief, the passengers can make use of the comfortable lounge. Not all passengers use the free transport, of course. Some find it more convenient to drive their cars to the airport, where garage facilities are available. Many businessmen leave their cars at the airport while they're away interstate. A carefully supervised system of handling luggage ensures that it arrives with the passenger at his destination. The aircraft's nearly ready. The fuel, the luggage and the food are on board, and it's now nearly take-off time. But where's the captain? He's at the Department of Civil Aviation's Weather and Air Information Office, obtaining latest reports on the route he'll fly to Sydney. The pilot's gathered all his information, and luxury flight is about to begin. People who've travelled by air before know the service awaiting them, but first flighters have yet to experience the magic carpet of flight in a Sky Chief. Department of Civil Aviation officers will keep watch over the aeroplane every minute of its flight along the Melbourne to Sydney Sky Road. And that's one of the reasons why Australia's air safety record is the best in the world. The control tower directs the Sky Chief until it becomes airborne. The controller gives details of wind conditions in the vicinity of the airport and provides directions for takeoff.
1010, well advised. Yeah, Vim Sierra, clear line up, proceed to Sydney via 037 the boys and crew, flight level 150.
Now the tower controller hands over to the civil aviation operators who plot and supervise the paths of every aeroplane in their area. They, in turn, will hand over to Sydney officials when the aircraft is at the halfway mark on its 452-mile trip. 4 powerful engines easily carry the 50-ton aeroplane up to 20,000 feet, and the pilot sets the course for Sydney less than 2 hours away. On this flight, the pilot's Captain Peter Gibbs, a twice-decorated wartime flyer who was selected to fly the Queen and Prince Philip during the Royal Tour of Australia. He eases back the throttles and begins level flight nearly 4 miles above the green fields and shimmering rivers of Victoria's country districts. The flight engineer uses the most up-to-date electronic aids to analyze continuously the performance of the 4 Pratt & Whitney engines which power the Sky Chief. The airliner carries its passengers in an atmosphere of luxury. This giant of the skies travels so steadily and is so free of vibration that it seems to be gliding slowly through the air and not flying at more than 300 miles an hour. Every DC6B has a crew of 3 hostesses who've made a career of helping air travellers feel at home in their aircraft. They serve breakfast as the Sky Chief flies the radio beam to Sydney, far above the clouds and in the clear sunshine of the higher altitudes. Australians have the best in air transport. Service is top class and their fares are the cheapest in the world. After all, why shouldn't they be? No other people in the world make as much use of their airways. It's wonderfully cosy as the passengers breakfast inside the soundproof cabin, insulated by layers of sound-absorbing fiberglass from the powerful roar of the 2,500 horsepower engine. The morning sunshine streams through the large landscape windows as a group of overseas visitors watch the Australian scene unfolding below them. Passing over Canberra, the orderly lines of avenues and streets make an ideal subject for amateur cameramen. Captain Gibbs regularly flies ANA's airliners, although he's an executive of the company, and this gives him the chance to observe closely all flight operations. Hostesses take particular care of children, but it's not hard for them because all youngsters love flying, and it's a fast, safe way of sending unattended children into state. The Sky Chief left Melbourne less than 2 hours ago, yet it's already cruising over Sydney and preparing to touch down at Sydney Airport. For the passengers, the flight has been perfect and as smooth as they could wish. But for the aircrew, it was routine, typical of Sky Chief services linking every capital city. Air transport has made this continent smaller, drawing the cities so close to each other that not one is more than a few hours flying time away from any other. A Melbourne businessman can spend 5 or 6 hours in Sydney and be home in time for dinner with his family. An example of fast, modern flying. Other businessmen maintain offices in 2 or more capital cities, and many of them commute regularly between these offices, using the airways the same way an average worker would use the tram, bus or train. It's almost time to take off for Brisbane, and more fuel is pumped into the tanks, once again under the flight engineer's supervision. Fresh, tasty snacks are taken aboard to be served during the second stage of this flight. The time's only 10 a.m. and luggage belonging to passengers joining the service is stowed aboard. Age is no barrier to air travel these days. The very young and the very old fly comfortably in the DC6B. Down below is the harbour bridge, as the Sky Chief climbs up to the 20,000 feet level, emerging into a placid new world above the cloud blanket. Riding the radio beam to Brisbane, the Sky Chief sweeps through the thin, cold air, its pressurised cabin held at a constant, comfortable temperature, regardless of outside conditions. 20,000 feet up. That's about 2/3 the height of Mount Everest. And passengers are having an armchair ride. The clouds and turbulent air are far below, and the air at this level's calm, just perfect for flying. Passengers aren't conscious of the radio beam guiding the huge airliner along its route, nor are they aware of the distance measuring equipment which gives the aircraft's exact position in relation to automatic stations along the route. And the third vital service has been at work ever since the Sky Chief took to the air. Conducted by Department of Civil Aviation operators, it has kept constant watch on the flight. The standard of service in aeroplanes flying Australia's internal routes is equal to anything in the world, and it's shared by everybody, whether the traveller is a housewife, businessman, tourist, or a very junior flyer. This aeroplane is moving at 315 miles an hour, yet the engines are operating at less than half their rated horsepower. It's more economical this way, but it's always handy to have power in reserve in case headwinds threaten to slow down the flight. But then, people don't drive their cars at top speed all the time. It's unnecessary. Outside, the rarefied air is far too thin for people to breathe comfortably. That's why cabin pressurization is the feature most air travelers seek. It allows aircraft to fly higher, escaping low altitudes where storms and more active air currents can cause bumpy flights. Descending again, the Sky Chief passes over Brisbane, nearly 1,000 miles away from its starting point in Melbourne, yet the trip has taken only 4 hours. There's no feeling of tiredness as passengers leave the Sky Chief after a typical smooth flight. The DC6B has provided the means for rapid changes of scenery within very short periods. Holidaymakers can escape Melbourne's chill winter any morning and be walking Brisbane's sun-drenched streets before lunch. They can travel from Sydney to Hobart in even less flying time to sample Tasmania's green beauty. Or they can cross the continent from Perth to Melbourne via Adelaide in a fraction of the time taken by road, rail or sea. The network of Sky Chief routes offers a unique opportunity to change climates in a few hours. There aren't many countries where it's possible to leave midwinter behind in the morning and arrive 3 or 4 hours later in the warm tropics for swimming and sunbathing. An ANA Sky Chief will never grow old. This one has logged 9,000 hours in the air and is now due for a complete overhaul. Preventative maintenance is the principle behind the servicing of these airliners, and the system constantly introduces new developments which originate in the Douglas Company's plants in America. New components replace those which have completed their span of service in the aeroplane. During the past 3 months, this plane has flown more than 250,000 miles, carrying 15,000 people and 1.5 million pounds of cargo between Australia's capital cities. When it returns to service, after a couple of weeks in the workshops, it will be a brand new Sky Chief. As a result of this exhaustive system, it will be kept in a state of perpetual youth. We've seen some of the preparation and activity behind a Sky Chief flight, but there's a great deal more in the operation of an airline. Now we'll see what goes on in the engineering and overhaul sections, vital departments which keep the aircraft operating with mechanical perfection. This young apprentice is beginning his career in ANA's metal shop, where for more than 20 years expert workers with lightweight metals used in aircraft construction have developed their skills. He has learned that every metal part is given an estimated life, after which it's replaced as part of the process of preventative maintenance. In the electrical repairs division, many specialist workers have grown up in the aviation industry, gaining valuable knowledge which they pass on to apprentices. DC6B is fitted with hundreds of different types of electric motors and electrically operated appliances which are serviced and maintained by a team of highly trained electricians. Part of their work involves magnetos and spark distributing systems of Pratt & Whitney engines being checked here on a test bench. A generator from a DC6B engine is given a trial run. The all-important batteries pass through the servicing division, where the power storage units are checked and maintained. This ensures that they operate at maximum efficiency, because a great deal depends on them during flight. Part of their work is to provide power for retractable landing lamps and the mechanism which operates them. Their power also operates the blinker lights fitted in every airliner, but they supply every piece of electronic equipment in an aeroplane's cockpit. For the advance of aeroplane design and the devices used in them, the instrument maker has become a figure of great importance in any airline. The Sky Chief is fitted with a wide range of specialized instruments, and it's the instrument maker's duty to maintain and repair them. Nearly 100 experts in this field are employed by ANA to keep their instruments operating perfectly. They test automatic pilots for accuracy and serve as gyroscopic compasses. Equipment like the electronic autopilot and the master direction finder are overhauled by experts who have up to 20 years' experience behind them. Half of the people employed by ANA are directly concerned with the engineering, electrical and mechanical sections, which keep the aeroplanes in brand new condition. It's their responsibility to keep the Sky Chiefs and all other planes perpetually young. On this tray, instruments worth £50,000 are prepared for installation in ANA airliners. 4 Pratt & Whitney engines with a power of 7 locomotives drive the DC6B. They are removed for overhaul when they've completed 1,600 hours of work in a Sky Chief. They are stripped down and immersed in cleaning baths. Then come inspections, replacements and any other work necessary before the parts are collected in readiness for reassembly. Carburetors are overhauled before being tested on a flow table. Efficient combustion is essential in a modern aircraft engine, and carburetors must play their part perfectly. Fuel flow is recorded during the test because it shows exactly how the piece of machinery will function when the engine to which it is fitted is returned to the aircraft. Finally, with the overhaul of every separate component completed, each engine is reassembled. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine, cost-20 functioning at any airline, depends to a large degree upon the efficiency of its engine maintenance and overhaul division. ANA's engineering section holds many world records for the maintenance and operation of its aircraft engines. After assembly, each engine is mounted on a mobile test unit and driven to the testing grounds. The cabin of the mobile test bed is equipped with gauges and indicators used in the cockpit of a DC6B, and these are checked throughout a 4.5-hour test run while engine power is steadily increased. Each reconditioned engine must perform like a new one, the standards set by its manufacturers and civil aviation authorities. Its run-in period completed, the recorded data of its performance will be examined by senior engineers before the engine is finally declared fit for service in aircraft. Balancing the three-blade reversible pitch propellers, which are fitted to the Pratt & Whitney engines, calls for great care. Each propeller is so finely adjusted that the weight of a match can upset its balance. Then the pitch reversal mechanism is tested. The engines refitted to the Sky Chief may be new or reconditioned. Standardization of aircraft in the ANA fleet has resulted in a faster overhaul time because engines are interchangeable. When £750,000 are spent on an airliner such as the Sky Chief, it's obvious that it should spend as little time as possible on the ground. So aircraft fitters, hydraulics engineers and experts in every other phase of aircraft engineering work smoothly and swiftly to complete the overhaul in the shortest possible time. The tricycle undercarriage that supports nearly 50 tons of takeoff has its regular check. The huge tyres, the hydraulic retraction and the braking systems undergo close scrutiny because of their vital job. The aluminium alloy skin of the airliner is polished until the metal gleams. This high polish actually increases the speed at which the plane will fly. It doesn't matter whether a part or an instrument in the aeroplane is operating perfectly when overhaul time comes around. It must come out for a complete check. Components which have reached the end of their estimated life are discarded, even if they're still working properly. This method of maintenance makes sure that no failures can take place through old or faulty equipment. It's not necessary to take the overhauled aircraft on a test flight to watch the performance of most of the new parts. Most parts are tested on the ground as the four engines come into life again. The propellers slice through the air 2,000 times a minute for several hours, preparing for the time when they will again lift the giant Sky Chief into the air. The men who fly the airliners also undergo periodic checks in flight training schools, where they take refresher courses. This compulsory schooling is one of the reasons for Australia's world record of safe and efficient flying. No matter how senior he is, every pilot must go back to school at regular intervals to fly the linked trainer. Tender steaks and tasty snacks. In fact, every meal served on ANA aeroplanes is prepared by the airline's own catering division, one of the largest catering organisations in Australia. The chefs prepare their meals so that they'll be just as tasty an hour after they've been made up. Airline chefs have special problems, but they've overcome them all through intensive study in this particular field of catering. Pastry cooks make all the biscuits and cakes served in the company's fleet of modern airliners. Appealing, colourful cold salads are the choice of many air travellers, and thousands of these trays are prepared each week. People from all parts of the globe consider this service to be equal to anything provided by any other major airline. But to ANA, it's just another part of its top-line service. Our service passengers can expect when they wing their way with ANA. The Sky Chief has been test flown and is back in service, carrying its freight and passengers to all parts of the Commonwealth. It's now on a flight to Perth, the longest single trip in the network, and of course, the usual watch over the flight will be provided by Civil Aviation Department officers. Luxury flight in Australia reaches its highest standards on the Sky Chief route from Melbourne to Perth via Adelaide. Service is at its best during the 2,000 miles transcontinental flight, which brings Melbourne and Perth within 7 hours flying time of each other. Flight engineer watches the performance of the four engines and records details in individual logbooks which accompany each engine during the whole of its working life. As usual, there's a crew of 6 for the Perth flight. There's the captain, the first officer and the flight engineer up forward in the cockpit, and 3 hostesses in the cabin to attend to the 58 passengers. Well-planned buffet makes it easy for the hostesses to serve meals. It was designed, built and installed in ANA's own workshops. In test flights, the DC6B was flown a distance equal to 24 trips around the world. Douglas, the aircraft manufacturers who have built most of the world's airliners, have produced one of their very best aeroplanes in the DC6B. The Sky Chief is operated by 32 of the world's major airlines and has carried more than 45 million passengers since it first went into service. There's plenty of room in the long cabin to walk around, and an extra feature for comfort is the Starlight Lounge. Through the big soundproof landscape windows are the waters of the Great Australian Bight. Within the cabin, the pressurization plant is working silently to produce ground-level comfort as the Sky Chief soars through the skies at 20,000 feet. The windows are optically perfect, and still pictures and movie scenes of excellent quality can be taken of the landscape below or the fascinating cloud formation seen at this height. The Blue Ribbon transcontinental flight by Sky Chief has become noted for the superb dinners served during flight. No luxury hotel could serve a more interesting or appealing meal than this. An aperitif of sherry or tomato juice, together with savouries, is a prelude to the beautifully prepared dinner to follow. After the fruit cocktail comes the main course, roast seasoned chicken, the greenest of peas, braised celery and the best of South Australia's tomatoes. Even the humble potato is dressed like a king to take his place in this majestic meal. The wine list includes most of the better Australian vintages and some from overseas. Now an assortment of cheeses from many parts of the world. And finally, coffee, served from a magnificent silver set to mark the conclusion of a most satisfying meal. Time's passed quickly, and the Sky Chief lands at Perth. The continent has been spanned in less than half a day. East has met west after only 7 hours of luxury flight, instead of days of arduous travel. The tremendous disadvantages of travel between Australia's far-flung capital cities have been minimised by the Sky Chief, an aeroplane which is making a valuable contribution to the Commonwealth of Australia. Capital cities, industrial centres and provincial towns are now linked by an ever-expanding system of air routes. Australian National Airways network is more than 14,000 miles long and covers every state, bringing rapid transport to the industrialist seeking markets for his goods, bringing swift travel to the businessman whose time is valuable, bringing quick flights to the holidaymaker whose time is no longer wasted in travel. The Douglas DC6B Sky Chief has provided the means to strengthen the vital transport system with its safe, reliable service.